Hi everyone, welcome. Welcome to Laser Talk. Good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning. We didn't do a live stream yesterday, so I want to make it up today. It's midweek. All right, so we'll talk about the fate of one Chinese PLA general. Someone just said, wasn't this general already retired? Yes, he already retired in 2017. Uh, but news related to him recently, I think, make it worthwhile to have a session. Um, so we'll talk about who he is, why Xi Jinping is particularly upset with him. We'll also talk about the three anti-Xi factions within the party right now, and also the possible impact of sacking this general within the PLA. Since Xi Jinping came to power, he has been cleaning out his political enemies in the name of the anti-corruption. And the highest ranking CCP official he brought down is former Politburo Standing Committee member Zhou Yongkang. He was given a life sentence for corruption and abuse of power. But Zhou is not a princeling. What's the severest sentence Xi Jinping gave to a princeling? It was also life in prison, and it was given to Bo Xilai, the guy who schemed with Zhou Yongkang to stage a coup against Xi, and she locked him up for the rest of his life. She has never given death sentence, including suspended death sentence, to a princeling. There was one official who was given a capital punishment, and that was Lai Xiaoming, the former chairman of China Huarong Asset Management, for corruption. But Lai was not a princeling either. But this seems to be changing soon. What I meant is the fact that he has never given a death sentence to a princeling. That seems to be changing soon. On March 24th, Hong Kong's Minbao, a newspaper, published an article citing sources from Beijing, saying that the former National Defense University's political commissar and Air Force General Liu Yazhou may be given a death sentence suspended for 2 years due to corruption. And the report said that they're wrapping up his case and have found that he and his family have received large sums of money in the tens of millions from interested parties. And the news was shocking for two reasons. First is unthinkable to give someone a princeling in this case, a death sentence for receiving large donations, right, on behalf of their family foundation, which is normal. I mean, think about it. Don't we have politicians in the West who receive donations for their family foundations? And then two, General Liu Yazhou is a princeling, and this would make him the first princeling to be given a suspended death sentence, if the news report is true. So, given the fact that a princeling's, it's just hard to believe that a princeling is given a suspended death sentence for accepting money. He must have been involved in some sort of a political endeavor that's threatening to Xi Jinping, such as a coup d'etat. So tonight we'll talk about, first of all, is the rumor true? Then we'll talk about who General Liu Yazhou is and some of his ideas. And then the three anti-Xi Jinping forces within the CCP in relations to him, and also the possible impact on the Chinese PLA, if this news report is true. So first of all, is the rumor true? Well, Liu's status of a princeling came from his marriage to the daughter of the former CCP president, Li Xianye. Hong Kong newspaper said that, according to the sources from Beijing, his wife, the former president's daughter, is safe and wouldn't be affected. Now, rumors about his arrest first appeared in December 2021, which was about 10 months before the party's Congress. And that the months up to a year leading up to the party Congress was a critical time for Xi Jinping to secure his power base. And then the rumor has been spreading for over a year. Some believe them, some believe they're true, some did not. I have been ignoring them because it's hard to prove. But the reappearance of the rumor caught my attention, and the timing of it right after Xi Jinping officially started his third term, which was last February, last month, is worth noting. Also, media in Hong Kong now has become more under Xi Jinping's control. It was under the Jiang Zemin's faction's control for the most part, but it seems that they have, she has more and more control over the media in Hong Kong. Take a look at what happened to Apple Daily, right? So it's hard to believe that a paper that didn't, a paper that didn't get okay from the top leadership in Beijing would dare to publish such a sensational story, and the stake would be very high. So I decided to look into it, and my sense is that Beijing might have intentionally leaked it through Hong Kong to test the public reactions about Liu's severe sentencing. But I think the intention from the top leadership to give him a suspended death sentence is real. Okay, so now let's talk about who this guy is, right? He, like I said, he is a princeling. He is a military strategist. He's a geopolitical expert, and he is one of the brightest minds within the Chinese PLA. And I read somewhere that there's a team within the U.S. government, or maybe within the U.S. military, a team of people studying his ideas and theories. That just shows you how much interest he attracts from within China and also outside China. I do have pictures. Do I have pictures? I do. Oh, here we go. Now he has served in the PLA for 50 years before retiring in 2017. And from the Central Military Commission, the Beijing Military Region, the Chengdu Military Region, to the PLA Air Force, to the National Defense University, he has served in various capacities and has many colleagues and friends and subordinates and followers. And that makes him very influential in the PLA. Different from other PLA leaders, he is multi-talented and is very familiar with Western politics, Western military theories and history. He studied English for his undergrad education at Wuhan University, and that's where he met his wife, who also studied English. They were classmates. He's also a writer and authored a number of books on military strategy, philosophy, and history. He was the director of China's Writers Association decades ago, at the end of 1984. And then from May 1986 to 1987, he was a visiting scholar at Stanford University. He's considered a military theorist and a thought leader. He's also a great public speaker and very outspoken. For 8 years, he was the political commissar at the National Defense University, which is called the cradle of PLA generals. And many of his students are now senior officers in the PLA. All of this contribute to his enormous influence within the Chinese PLA. In addition, his family are also influential. He was born into a military family. His father was the deputy political commissar of the Lanzhou Military Region's logistic department and is a major general. He has 4 younger brothers, so they have a total of 5 siblings. He's the oldest. His second brother is the major general and deputy military officer in the Intelligence Bureau of the General Staff Department of the Central Military Commission. And his youngest brother is the director of the political department of the Air Force base in Wuhan. His other 2 brothers interestingly live overseas and are educators. One of them is an expert of Sino-US relations and a professor adjunct professor at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. His name is Liu Yazhou. And Dr. Liu Yazhou is a senior advisor on China affairs at the Carter Center. I do have a picture of him. Oh, yeah. Here is here's a picture of his wife in her younger years with his in-laws and her parents. So the man in the center is Li Xiannian, former president of China. So the young lady on the left is his wife. And here's a picture of General Liu on the far left with Xi Jinping. We'll talk about this later. Here is his brother, Dr. Liu Yazhou, at the Carter Center. So let's come back. Now he's like many princelings who supported Xi Jinping during his early years of rising to power. Liu publicly supported Xi's anti-corruption effort within the PLA when Xi took down Jiang Zemin's two corrupt vice chairmen of the military from the Central Military Commission, Guo Boxiong and Xu Caihou. And because of his support, he was widely believed or expected to be promoted to defense minister, but it didn't happen. Instead, he retired early before the retiring age. I'll talk about the reason why he was forced to retire later. But the real reason, but I think all these reasons are just circumstantial. I think the real reason is Liu Yazhou and Xi Jinping do not see eye to eye, militarily and politically. Although Liu is a supporter of CCP, he does believe in the rule of the party. He's open to some democratic ideas. Citing words of a modern Japanese thinker, Fukuzawa Yukichi, he said that for a nation to rise, three changes must take place. The first is the change of people's heart. The second is the change of the political system. And the third is the change of the vessels, meaning the apparatus, the instruments. And he said the order must not be reversed. If the order is reversed, he said, if people try to make a shortcut by reversing the order, he said it would fail. So if you look at what's happening in China, it seems that there's no change of political system. People's heart have changed privately, but collectively, I mean, they have not, right? They have to support the party. So the only thing the CCP has tried so hard to change is the vessel, the apparatus, the tools. And interestingly, Liu also predicted CCP's geopolitical troubles. In 2015, that's 8 years ago, CCP leadership had a series of discussions, internal discussions about the crisis of the regime and the possible fall of the party. That year, a military newspaper reprinted one of his book called The Spirit. In Chinese, it's 精神. And the book discussed three major military crises that could lead to the fall of the regime, namely the Taiwan Strait War, a Sino-Japanese war, and a border unrest. And his book claimed that a war in the Taiwan Strait could lead to a war between China and Japan. And a conflict in the East China Sea could also lead to a war between China and Japan. And there are irreconcilable differences between and Japan over the demarcation of the East China Sea. In addition, he believed that a border unrest caused by a separatist movement in one of China's minority ethnic groups, or by one of the minority ethnic groups, such as Xinjiang, is particularly likely. If you look at what's happening in China today, the risk of all three wars that he predicted, namely a Taiwan Strait War, a Sino-Japanese military conflict, and border unrests, are all very high, right? The risk of all three conflicts are very high. Um, he also said in the book that if a war breaks out, now this one may not be from that book, it may be from other books he wrote. He said Beijing is left with only one choice, but the United States has multiple options. For the United States, he said, if Japan wins, it wins. If Taiwan wins, the US wins too. If Xinjiang splits, the US still wins. Conversely, if Japan loses, the US still wins because it doesn't lose. If Taiwan loses, the US can choose to withdraw from the war. And even if Taiwan returns to China, the US military can still remain in Asia and therefore doesn't really lose entirely. That's his view. On Sino-US relations, he said, I'm particularly worried about the deterioration of Sino-US relations because it will affect China's development. Excuse me. It will be very difficult for China to modernize if it remains hostile to the United States. Now, don't be fooled. Some people say he is very pro-America, pro-democracy. And these comments don't necessarily mean he totally welcomes democratic values with open arms, because he isn't against the idea of a military takeover of Taiwan. He's actually among those who strongly advocate taking Taiwan by force. But he has publicly stated that at their gatherings that Xi Jinping does not have the ability or the wisdom to lead this decisive battle. He believes that they needed a more capable commander-in-chief. I don't know whether he was referring to himself, but he certainly has a lot of pride and has the guts to express his beliefs and ideas. And this certainly is problematic for him. He's outspoken, and this isn't appreciated by Xi Jinping. Cai Xia, former professor at the Central Party School who left the United States, wrote in Foreign Affairs, in a Foreign Affairs article last September, that around the time of 2017, Liu Yazhou wrote to Xi Jinping to suggest a new Xinjiang policy, Xinjiang, the border, right? But he was warned not to make any more presumptuous comments. So he must feel that he's being marginalized. All right, so I already give you kind of an overview of who he is and some of his thoughts and beliefs. Now let's talk about the anti-Xi forces within the CCP because it's related to his downfall. There are now three main anti-Xi forces within the CCP. The first is comprised of the staunch supporters of Deng Xiaoping's economic reforms. This is the weakest force, and the key members include former Premier Li Keqiang and former leader Hu Jintao. And their idol is Deng Xiaoping, right? And then the second force is the princelings, who aren't directly involved in politics, but who have a strong interest in where the country is going. And many of them originally supported Xi Jinping, but have turned against him because they feel that they have lost their privilege over the past 10 years. And they worry about their massive assets in the United States as they watch Sino-US relations worsen. So that's the second force. And then the third force is Xi Jinping's long-standing enemy, the Jiang Zemin faction. And now, after Jiang's death, it's spearheaded by his deputy, Zheng Qinghong. So the question is, which faction does General Liu belong to? People would naturally assume that he belongs to the second faction, the princeling faction. But I think that may be true. But I want to offer a different view on this. I think he probably has too much pride to think that he's associated with any faction. Some people say he's arrogant because he's really smart, or he's talented. I mean, he does seem to have. He's very perceptive, right? So he's a thought leader, has his own opinions about politics, and he sees himself as having or being his own school. So from his perspective, he may not associate himself. He does not like to draw a line between him and any factions. Um, but here's the problem. He has a problem. That is, the other factions all want him to join them because of his enormous influence and because of his outspokenness, particularly his influence in the Chinese military, because to have him on their side is a plus to their political struggle. The princelings definitely want him to be their spiritual leader because of his outspokenness. And then the Jiang faction definitely want to take advantage of his influence. And the reformists share the same view with him on Deng Xiaoping. Um, by the way, General Liu has high respect for Deng Xiaoping. I'll talk about that later. So even though he might not have joined any anti-Xi forces officially, he appeared to have joined hands with all of Xi Jinping's enemies to oppose him and to oppose his third term, right? Back in 2021 or 2022, that's what she was most concerned with, was his third term. So that's what I want to that's the point I want to bring out here. Um, and then and General Liu did look very suspicious for having crossed that line, and being associated with all factions. Well, why do I say that? Well, first of all, his father-in-law, the former Chinese president Li Xiannian, was one of CCP elders who promoted Jiang Zemin to top leadership, which has always Jiang Zemin, has always been Xi Jinping's number one political enemy. And that's Liu's connection to the Jiang faction. And also, a Jiang faction affiliated writer has been writing articles in praise of Deng Xiaoping. And the article was published on, guess what, where? On the website run by his professor brother living in Atlanta. And the same writer also recently wrote articles criticizing China's involvement in the Ukraine war. So you see, that's his connection to the Jiang faction. Now, he is a great admirer of Deng Xiaoping, and he called Deng Xiaoping the great man that he feels closest to. And he calls him the one leader who knows the world best. Deng Xiaoping is worshipped like he's a symbolism, shall we say, that the reformists use in their fight with Xi Jinping. So the fact that he publicly, admired Deng Xiaoping and then work with the Jiang faction affiliated writer to write articles successively in praise of Deng Xiaoping makes Xi Jinping think he's working with all of the factions that were against him. So from Xi's perspective, the three factions have joined forces and repeatedly published articles to embarrass him and to challenge him. And General Liu must be the person, or looks like the person who connects them all, because he does connects with all three. And that isn't everything. General Liu also has some troubling American connections. He had maybe an American girlfriend, actress Bai Ling. Do I have a picture? I do. Here it is. General Liu was in charge of producing a TV series to commemorate the CCP's long march, the long journey. It was actually It was the Red Armies fleeing from defeat in war, and then it's called the Red Army's Long March. So he was in charge of producing a TV series to commemorate. I don't know whether it's the 70th or the 80th anniversary of that Long March, and he invited his American girlfriend to star in the series. And so here you have a picture of Bai Ling, in Hollywood on the right, and then and her wearing the Red Army costume or uniform in the film or in the video. And that caused controversy because CCP elders found Miss Bai's provocative American style. I tried to find a conservative picture of her here. I mean, she has a lot of very provocative pictures out on the internet. So they found that troubling. They thought that she was unfit for playing the leading role in this Red Army film. And worse yet, this isn't the worst. Worse yet, the actress was said to have testified at the U.S. Congress about CCP leaders' promiscuous relations with famous women. They're like unwritten rule about their the unwritten CCP's unwritten rules about their demanded relations with famous women, with various famous women. And so this actress testified against that. That must have annoyed the top leadership. It's unacceptable to them that General Liu gave such an important TV role to an American actress who had made, quote unquote, anti-China or anti-CCP testimony. This still isn't everything. Another troubling relations General Liu has is his professor brother in Atlanta, who is a Sino-US expert. I do have a picture of him, who works for an American think tank, right? The Carter Center. The political party he's affiliated with is Democrat. He's a Democrat. So remember, a week after Joe Biden took office in January 2021, the Atlantic Council published an article called "The Longer Telegram." The article suggested that the U.S. government should partner with anti-Xi Jinping forces within the CCP to overthrow Xi, to find a replacement for him. Xi's people must have thought, was wondering. I mean, coming from their logic and way of thinking, they must be wondering who gave the Americans this idea. They might have thought of General Liu's brother, right? Because he's a Democrat. He's oh, by the way, this Dr. Liu Yazhou, according to public records, has accompanied President Carter to visit China 5 times. I think this probably happened after his retirement, after Carter's retirement. But it says he accompanied Carter to visit China 5 times. So it sounds like he's an important China advisor to the Democrats within, in Washington. So from the CCP's perspective, they probably have, I don't know if there's any linkage, but from their perspective, they must be thinking, who gave Americans this idea? They must be very suspicious, any of them or any of their own spies, tipping Americans for that idea. It's very likely that they thought of General Liu's brother, because so he has all these troubling American connections. Now imagine a talented, a popular general who's full of ideas and visions, is working with all of Xi Jinping's political enemies and possibly working with the Americans. What do you think what do you think his fate will be, right? Now, Xi Jinping's biggest concern is still Liu's influence in the Chinese PLA. This is evident in his constant shuffling of his military commanders in the 18 months leading up to the party congress. And people say it was done to clear out Liu's opposition, his influence within the PLA. So in 2021, the Central Military Commission, the Beijing garrison, the 5 major war zones all had major personnel changes at the very top. And the commanders of the 8 provincial military regions were replaced. Between December 2020 to July 2021, 9 out of the 10 top officers in the armed forces were replaced. And the West War Zone, right, the Western military war zone, changed commanders 3 times. By 2021, Beijing garrison changed 4 commanders and 3 political commissars. And people say these unusually high number of personnel changes within the PLA is the result of Xi Jinping wanting to clearing out Liu's influence within the PLA. If the suspended death sentence is true, if we did see that unfolding in the next, I don't know, couple of weeks or months, then that means General Liu must have been involved in some kind of anti-Xi activities, whether voluntarily or involuntarily. By involuntarily, I mean his outspokenness and many ideas might have been used by Xi Jinping's enemies to overthrow Xi, even though it may not be General Liu's his intention. It just shows you that how dangerous it is to have ideas and visions and be outspoken within the CCP family. And that itself, even if you don't do anything, it's highly risky, right? To be smart, to have vision, and to see things clearly, and then also to be outspoken. He probably thinks that nobody could touch him because he's a princeling, and then he's retired, and he just kept speaking up. Because you will be used by other forces to fight their enemies because they know how to use you. Because if you still have pride, people believe, people like General Liu feel very strongly about their ideas and philosophy and visions. So, and that itself is a weakness that could be taken advantage of by those people, because they know they will say things to get you to get excited about your ideas. But anyways, that just shows you. But that may not be the case. He might be voluntarily involved in those activities to overthrow Xi. That's highly possible. I'm not saying it's not possible, but either way, right? So now, by giving Liu a severe sentence, Xi Jinping is warning those who are not loyal. But would it cause backfire, right? Particularly among mid-level officers who have their own ideas and independent thinking. They may really share the same ideas and philosophy with General Liu. Or even those who don't share ideas, share his ideas and visions, but who graduated from the National Defense University when he was the head. So they feel a personal connection to him. And what does that mean? So here I want to play a video. I saw, you probably know Yao Chen, who was a former officer in the Chinese Navy, who now lives in the U.S. He was interviewed about his view on General Liu's possible sentencing, and I just want to play a short clip of what he said. Oh, here we go.
那么习近平
Oh,
现在
hold on. Let me make this bigger. Here we go. No, this doesn't work. I have to make myself disappear. Okay, here we go.
那么习近平现在最怕的是军队的倒戈，他现在给军队那么大的压力，军队受不了，军队真的受不了。那么刘亚洲这么个有影响的人物啊，在军队那么多弟子，从内心里来说，也是不平的。所以说，中共的军队的倒戈，军队的这个对抗，是等待时机吧。
Okay, so that's what he said. That ends my presentation. I'm sharing that with you not because I agree with him, but I think that opinion needs to be shared, and there is an opinion. His view needs to be shared. I think it's very difficult for them to have an uprising. I think it's. He said they're waiting for an opportunity. That opportunity is hard to come by, because of just because of the tight control the CCP has on everyone. All right, so that ends my presentation. And I hope it's helpful. So let me see if people have questions for me. Okay, well, it looked like no questions. Oh, travel with love. Thank you, Mrs. Lei, for sharing another insightful, intelligent video. Oh, you're most welcome. You're most welcome. All right. Let me see if people have questions for me. This one is pretty straightforward. Let me see. Oh, from Voices on Espanol at Lei, it's odd that a military general with a large following among PLA officers wouldn't get tipped off that she was about to crack down on him. How did he miss the sign? What can he do? What can he do? I think, okay. I think even though he will, I mean, they're not gonna execute him. That's for sure, right? So when they lock up these senior CCP leaders, I mean, they lock them up, but they still live relatively well in the prison or somewhere. And they may only lock them up for a few years, and then keep them under house arrest later if they cooperate with the regime. So they're not going to suffer anything. They're not going to suffer anything physically. I think yeah. So it's not like he feared for his life and want to run away. It's not anything like that. And I think honestly, he probably didn't think that he would be taken away. I don't think he expected that. That's just my gut feeling. Thank you, Sir Humphrey. Thank you. Let me see. It doesn't sound fun to be part of the CCP. It does not. Yeah. A question from Boo Boo Bear. Could General Liu have been behind the balloons? Well, who knows? It might be one of his followers, who's upset about what's happening, and then he said, "Okay, let's send some balloons over to cause some headaches for the big boss." Right? It's likely. That's very good thinking. All right, from Frosty Flake. Xi Jinping seems more and more like Putin and developing similar megalomania. All right. I don't know if the two are similar. The two are similar, because of their predicament, right? But I can't say if they are really becoming uh, more like each other. I wouldn't think so. Um, all right, so let's see. From Mario Necula. All these names are so fun to read. Okay, hello, Lei. I enjoy very much your analysis regarding CCP. How long is the president's term in Communist China? Life? Supposedly, what, 5 years, 10 years? But he's starting his 11th year, so third term. But I think Mao ruled for life. So is he going to rule for life? We'll see. All right. So if you guys don't have any other questions, I will end it here. Enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of the night. All right. Thank you very much. Bye bye.